So at this point, we know the basics about the loud and extroverted Tangle, as well as the quiet and introverted Whisper. If you don't know them though, I do have some videos on them. As the old saying goes though, opposites attract, and these two would go on to make a really fun pairing with their own little mini-series, which is aptly named Tangle and Whisper. The story starts off on a pretty quiet day. Tangle is bored after her adventure with Sonic and Blaze, and she laments to her friend Jewel, who owns the local museum, about this. Suddenly, much to Tangle's joy, there's a crash noise heard outside. Upon investigation, Tangle would find that Sonic is fleeing gunfire. Gunfire from Whisper of all people. Something here isn't quite right though. Sonic isn't really living up to that whole fastest thing alive name, and last I checked, Sonic has green eyes, not brown eyes. Whisper would pursue Sonic through the city, and eventually Sonic would start flirting with some random lady, and oh no. Did someone hire Ken Penders again? Is this just Sonic from another universe who's here to flirt and sleep with every woman he meets like in that one Archie Sonic comic? Please, Whisper, just take the shot before he goes to take a nap with her out in the woods. I kid, of course, this isn't what's happening. It is kind of wild though that Whisper was totally going to headshot this person, but sadly she can't get a clear shot, and as Whisper repositions herself, this brown-eyed imposter makes his run down an alleyway only to get stopped by Tangle, who, like the reader, is desperately trying to figure out what's going on here. The sinister Sonic explains that Eggman, who is now back and no longer Mr. Tinker, has put a mind control chip inside of Whisper's helmet, which has made her crazy and I guess attempting to kill Sonic. Suspicious Sonic here though suggests that the ever tenacious Tangle should take down her target before interrogating her. Finally, with a clear shot, Whisper sees this ominous being posing as Sonic who looks straight out of Sonic.exe, but before she can take the shot, Tangle would ram into her at full speed, and this would result in a short fight, ending with Tangle removing Whisper's mask, much to her dismay. With Whisper's mask off, Tangle, of course, believes that she saved the day, only to learn that, well, Sonic wasn't exactly who he said he was, and now he's gone? Whoops. Whisper shoves the mask onto Tangle, which plays a recording. In this recording, we would see that Whisper has been trying to find Sonic, and this imposter Sonic would approach Whisper. Whisper would warn him that she believes that Sonic is in danger, without knowing that this was an imposter who has a knife. Now from here, Tangle and Whisper would retreat to a quieter location, the museum that Jewel owns. We would also find that the Sonic imposter is now the woman that he was flirting with. Once safe with some tea, Whisper would explain that this body double is a mercenary who sold out to Eggman after he killed off his entire team. He's recently taken Sonic's form and began committing petty crimes, and even without seeing his brown eyes, we know that this isn't Sonic because there is only one Sonic character who steals candy from a baby.
A Chaos Emerald? You've got to be kidding me, guys. This is like taking candy from a baby, which is fine by me.
We'd also finally learn that this creature with the powers straight out of Full Metal Alchemist is called Mimic. Tangle, ever the hero, is ready to leap into action in order to help Whisper out with this, but she is immediately shut down. After some begging, both Tangle and her wisps convince Whisper to begrudgingly agree to take Tangle on with her. Finally, on the way out, they find a note pinned to the door with a knife inviting Whisper to settle things once and for all at an undisclosed location to the reader. Once at this location, which is an old Eggman bunker, we get to see this really fun dynamic between these two personalities. Unfortunately though, for Whisper, there isn't anything that she can scan inside of the building, which means they might be walking straight into a trap as they're going in essentially blind. To make matters worse, once inside, Tangle does the one thing you should never do while dealing with a crazy man with a knife, and she decides that these two should split up, with Tangle taking the high ground and Whisper going low, much to Whisper's frustration. Once separated, Tangle hears her friend Jewel calling for help. As Tangle runs in that direction, she catches up to Whisper, who informs Tangle that Mimic must have taken Jewel after they left. They run down towards the safe, where Tangle believes that Jewel is being held. It's at this moment though that Tangle realizes that Whisper has been talking pretty differently, and also she doesn't have her gun, and Too little too late, Tangle is kicked inside of the safe by the traitorous Whisper wannabe and is locked with limited oxygen in here. Shortly after this, The real Whisper comes face to face with a brown-eyed Tangle who leads her into a room where she has to fight this big old badnik. Of course, Whisper is a badass and she beats this badnik with ease, and then ends up in a shootout with Mimic. Finally, with Mimic pinned down, a seriously pissed off Whisper comes at him with a hammer, ready to lay right into him, but Mimic then shifts into a character that we've never seen, but Whisper clearly knows. He then shifts into another one that we haven't seen and berates Whisper for failing to protect her friends. Finally, Mimic turns into this big guy who is clearly tugging at Whisper's past as he blames her for their deaths, which clearly and very understandably is causing a ton of distress to Whisper. I mean, can you blame her considering that she's seeing the face of her dead friends? Thankfully, Whisper snaps out of this and lays into Mimic. It's clear from her face that he has struck a nerve with her and she's ready for her revenge. Unfortunately, she won't have time for revenge yet, because Mimic informs her that, well, if she wants Tangle to live, she is going to have to save her from this safe before A, she either runs out of air, or B, this place blows up, because, of course, Mimic rigged this place to explode. Whisper, understandably, abandons Mimic and rushes to save her friend, who is on the verge of passing out due to a lack of oxygen. Unfortunately for Tangle, they end up having to get back inside of this safe to just barely survive this massive explosion which follows. From here, things actually get pretty emotional. Whisper tells Tangle to go home. Tangle assumes that's because she fell for Mimic's trick, and she informs Whisper that she's not going to let it happen again, but Whisper won't accept this and still refuses to take her along with her. This causes Tangle to get really upset as she believes that she's a failure, and it's here that we learn that Whisper doesn't think that her friend is a failure, and for the first time we hear Whisper actually yell and not use that little whisper text bubble, as she explains that she cannot bear to lose another friend. From here, Tangle takes a seat next to Whisper, and there's this really sweet moment where she says that she's going to stop talking and give her friend a chance to share her past if she wants to, which thankfully Whisper accepts. Whisper would go on to explain that there were once 5 people in her group, all with punny names related to their job, except weirdly for Whisper. Also, yeah, surprisingly, Mimic was a part of this team. They were a group known as the Diamond Cutters, and they only took the most dangerous jobs against Eggman. Whisper would show Tangle, through recordings on her mask, what she and her group used to do. And yeah, they were pretty awesome, honestly. Their unique masks and guns are all really cool looking. Heck, even Whisper had a sniper rifle that could take down tanks, which is very awesome. We'd also learn that the masks translate what the wisps say, giving Whisper the power to understand them, which, cool. Of course, not everything ended up going so well, and with the reassurance of her wisps, Whisper would go on to share footage she's kept on her mask about how things ended. We'd learn that Mimic took a job to shut down Eggman systems along the coast, but once in there, we'd find that this wasn't what they had expected. These big giant vats would start to drain, revealing shadow androids, and before they really had time to register what was happening, let alone escape, the doors sealed and, well, their fates were sealed as well. The group would find themselves overrun by these androids, and by the time they realized that Mimic was gone, it was too late. We'd learn through Mimic's mask that he sold out his team to Eggman, and that these androids killed the 3 members who were betrayed. Mimic's blue wisp would abandon him, and Eggman would send Mimic to finish the job by killing Whisper. Mimic, of course, went out to go find Whisper, but she was hidden in the trees, so instead, Mimic delivered her gun and his mask to Eggman as false proof that he took her out. Whisper hid in the trees until the coast was clear, and then entered the facility to rescue her deceased members' wisps. We'd learn here that Whisper kept all of this footage for 2 reasons. The first was to never forget, and the second was to never forgive, which, honestly, such a cool freaking line from Whisper. Whisper informs Tangle that she's the first friend she's ever allowed herself to have ever since this incident, and she seriously could not bear the thought of losing her, which really pulls at the heartstrings, especially when Tangle exclaims that she's not leaving Whisper because they're friends. With that, Whisper super awkwardly opens up her arms and tearfully hugs Tangle for the first time, which is something that's super cool, and it's something that she's been shown to have a hard time with. I won't lie, I might have gotten a little bit teary when I was reading this issue, in a not too dissimilar way that Whisper was teary here as well. But, I mean, for real, this is some of the darkest stuff I've ever read in a Sonic comic. Like, dang, people talk about how IDW is really tamed compared to Archie, but this story here is proving otherwise to me. With the trail gone cold, Whisper now takes the role of the hunter and leaves a message for Mimic to come find her at the place where this all began. We would later find Tangle and Whisper in the ruins of the old Diamond Cutter's base, and this time, Mimic is going to make sure that he finishes the job. He brings an armada of badniks towards the base in such a cool way. Whisper just picks them off though one by one with her rifle. With that, Tangle retreats into the base as they fully expect Mimic to try and infiltrate on his own while this fleet distracts Whisper. While inside of the base, she notices a shadow and she sticks out her tail to trip the intruder, which is this brown-eyed Sonic again. This Sonic informs Tangle that he got here with the tornado and that Tails is out there helping Whisper. Tangle accepts this reason and she leads him into the trap room. In here, Mimic sees a hologram of all of his former teammates, including one of Whisper, who is cheerfully exclaiming how much safer she feels with him watching their backs. Unfortunately, this would have no effect on Mimic as he never viewed them as his friends, and so a fight between he and Tangle starts. Mimic takes a page from Full Metal Alchemist, which knocks Tangle straight off guard, and the two would continue to fight a bit, but Tangle would find herself unmatched. Luckily, Tangle isn't alone, and Whisper would come in and whack Mimic upside the head with his own wisp. Unfortunately though, the fact that this is Mimic's wisp is something that he would use to his advantage as he managed to convince his former wisp to leave the weapon. At the end of the day though, this weapon is pretty versatile with or without a wisp, and it can just be used as a club, which Whisper does do as she clubs Mimic right in the face. Versatility though kind of goes both ways with this gun, I guess, because Mimic would use it to knock Whisper to the floor. With Whisper down, Mimic would go for the shot, but luckily for Whisper isn't alone, and Tangle would take the chance to wrap him up and just wail on him in such a fun way. During this, Mimic would change shapes, and oh my god, if that isn't the scariest Vector I have ever seen. They had no right to make him look so scary here, but they did, and I don't know why. With Mimic defeated, Whisper goes for the finishing shot to his head, but Tangle stops her before taking the life of someone. She convinces Whisper to let him live with the shame of knowing that for the rest of his life he failed against Whisper, and he failed his mission to take down all of the Diamond Cutters. He would later find himself in a supercell built by Tails, and Mimic would go on with the usual intimidating bad guy thing where he claims that he's going to get out of here and he'll escape once again. But man, Whisper is having none of that, as she tells him that she's going to bury him deeper every single time. With that, this dynamic duo is official, and the two would work together a ton more against Eggman in different adventures together. Now, I'll be honest, this video went a little bit longer than I expected. I thought it was going to be closer to my Mr. Tinker video, which is why I ended up actually cutting this and making two shorter videos on Tangle and Whisper in an attempt to save time over here. But I really found myself enjoying this story, and I found more and more that I wanted to talk about. Heck, I didn't even get to talk about everything that I wanted to, like this really cute story where Tangle and Whisper work together to clean up the museum. I really hope though that I did a good job at introducing two of the coolest characters in the IDW comics to you, and that I also did a good job at illustrating this really awesome arc that's pretty absent of Sonic with the exception of Sonic's doppelganger. Tangle and Whisper have this wonderful relationship, and the writing team over at IDW really deserves a pat on the back for the work they've done. Before we finish, I have two kind of fun facts though. The first is that the issues that we looked at today saw the second time that the word crap has been used in the IDW comics. The first time, if you don't remember, was in issue 8 where we first met Whisper, and we would find this word again in issue number 2 of Tangle and Whisper. And I just think it's kind of weird because not only is this the first 2 times in this comic, but it's like the first 2 times out of any Sonic comic that I can think of where I've seen cuss words. It's not something I remember reading in the Archie comics. I don't have anything ultimately against it. It's just strange to me, I guess. It sticks out. And I'm not sure. If it did show up before, though, please correct me and tell me if I'm wrong. I would love to know. The second is about Mimic. You probably noticed that when he transforms, his hands always have those little suction cups on them. But did you notice that when he transforms, his feet also have the suction cups on them? Anyways, at the end of the day, if you enjoyed this, which I hope you did, feel free to leave a like, a subscribe, anything else like that. But, of course, at the end of the day, all I want you to do is have a good one.